Hey, I'm Tom, and I'm trying to watch every mecha anime. This is something that you might have heard of me doing if you, for example, have listened to the Three Baka podcast or followed me on social media for any length of time. Unfortunately, since the Three Baka podcast kind of imploded and is currently on an indefinite hiatus that, I hope ends someday, but we'll see. Um, I kind of lost any outlet for myself to talk about this process and talk about like the things that I'm watching, and it kind of led to me stalling out completely and just not watching shows for multiple years, unfortunately. Which has led to zero progress being made in 2024 or 25. Um, which is unfortunate. I don't want that to be the case. So originally, I was going to try to do solo, like edited down YouTube content, a la the style of anime YouTube. And it just wasn't for me. It didn't really click with me creatively. So I didn't really make it very far into that process. So I'm doing this a solo podcast where I just talk about this. I don't really have a title for it yet. Maybe it'll have one by the time that I actually release this. If not, whatever. That being said, a lot of the stuff in this episode specifically is going to be sort of a retread of stuff I've talked about before. If I just kind of jumped into it on the show I'm currently watching and what I'm actually talking about and stuff, in terms of where I am as of present, I feel like this series would be perpetually just unfinished and incomplete because it would be missing the first handful of years of Mecha, and I don't want the show to kind of carry that burden, I guess. So I'm going to be talking about the first handful of shows that I watched in this episode. Some of these I had watched. I've watched like multiple years ago at this point, so bear with me if I don't have the uh, a ton of memory surrounding some of these. All I've got is my notes, and that's it. Uh, I will not be refreshing myself on any of these because, like, oh my god, that is such a task. Um, but I did want to get into real fast, setting it up. Uh, what this is, what my rules are, sort of uh my criteria for mecha anime and stuff, all that kind of fun logistics stuff. So just to say it very clear, um I consider it a mecha anime if a person gets into and or otherwise pilots a robot. That simple, really. When I say a robot as well, it's kind of shaky. Obviously a lot of things are robots. Cars are robots if you really think about it. So like obviously I'm not going to be counting every racing anime as like a mecha. So, humanoid is the lean, but obviously mechs come in all shapes, sizes and design, and they're really not constrained by a whole lot. Mecha can get kind of out there, which is, cool, obviously. It's why I started. But, you know, um, that's just kind of where I have to I draw the line where I find I should draw the line. I don't consider something like Astro Boy Mecha, while, obviously Gundam and stuff is. There are some shows on here that are like they're not about a person piloting a robot. They just kind of slip through, and rather than remove them completely, if I set aside the time to watch them, I'm going to talk about them anyways, because talking about a show is more fun than not talking about the show. If there are like some shows that you think I absolutely should watch that don't meet this definition or you don't see them on my list, you know, um, please tell me about them and I will certainly give them a shot. I will say I did not come into this process as a big Mecha fan. That is not something that I was. I started this because my friend Yu, on co-host on the Three Baka podcast, was attempting to watch every anime ever, at least as far as he could like actually find. Um, And, I was like, "I think it would be really fun if I joined as part of this journey and, watched these shows, or watched at least, the mecha shows, the stuff I was interested in." Because there's a lot of older mecha that I have been sort of at a distance, "Oh, that seems really cool," for years, and I've never gotten around to any of them. So this was kind of my moment to, be like, "Okay, we're getting into this." Um, so, um, let's see. The other criteria that I'm kind of going off of rather, is I'm not watching anything from before Gundam. At least not not directly. I'm not seeking them out. I'm not making a complete list of the things from before Gundam. I'm starting at Gundam and I'm moving on because that's really where my interest in the genre starts. I know there's some stuff like some older Mazingers and Jeeg that I'm missing from before that. Which is all, really cool. I bet they're awesome. But I gotta limit the scope somehow. I have to. There's over 600 shows on my list as of this moment in time, and I update the list around January of every year. Just, just to have everything that came out in the last year on it. So as of right now, uh I am about 600 and 60 something shows out from finishing this, which is it's a lot. It's a lot. Maybe at the end if I'm still like, "Oh my god, I need more mecha." Then yeah, I can go back and I can watch some of the ones that I know I'm missing from before that. But as of right now, cutoff is Gundam. So including Gundam onward. Um and When it comes to actually finishing shows, quote unquote, um, I'm not really holding myself to that much of a standard here. My only rule is that I have to watch about 15 minutes of something before I decide to drop it. Um, with exceptions being made for movies that wrap up shows that I did not finish. We have at least one of those on the list right now. So, you know, generally speaking, 15-minute rule. I'm generally going in chronological order as well. I will mention when I break chronological order, but it doesn't happen that often. And the other thing I wanted to say is that my list is kind of by the nature of its very existence perpetually incomplete. Obviously, there's new mecha releasing every single season, kind of mostly. Um and I try my best to keep up with having stuff listed on the document, but obviously it's not possible to have everything. And also, I'm relying on databases like Mal to flesh out, my list. I don't have encyclopedic knowledge of anime and every anime ever released. I kind of hope that nobody does because that sounds overwhelming and scary. Um, but when it comes to relying on these lists, they're a lot of the times they're just incomplete themselves. There's a lot of shows that are mecha that don't get tagged as mecha, or they don't have the genre applied, or whatever goes wrong with them. Um and that's kind of more so what I'm talking about. In the description of every episode, I'm going to have a link to the document that I'm using to keep track of the various shows that I'm watching. And I encourage you, if you find things that are not on my list that you think fit my definition of mecha, or like I said, that you think I should check out, tell me about them. Let me know, and I'll try my best to check them out whenever I can. Like, again, talking about shows is more fun than not talking about shows. So I think that with a little bit of help from the community, that maybe I can get this to a more complete state. Also, I encourage you, if you're insane enough to try this too, you can make a copy of my list and just keep it for yourself. And attempt to watch shows. Like maybe you make it farther in a show than I did and you really like it, or maybe, like there's shows that like I can't find or whatever and you're able to track them down, like I think it would be really cool if this was like a community effort and that other people were kind of doing this as well. I'm going to be a little bit loose about spoilers in this podcast. I'm going to try to give spoiler warnings when I can, but again, no promises about any of that. Um yeah, I don't know. That's kind of all the opening stuff I've got for this episode. So, I think getting into the list is the next step. Let's talk about Gundam for a second and talk about why I started here. If you're completely unaware and in the dark and don't know what Gundam is somehow, Gundam is a Japanese anime series. Featuring a pilot who, pilots a giant robot in a wartime setting. And, the big difference with Gundam is that unlike other mecha shows, this one's actually about the characters. And I'm going to shut the fuck up and never say that again. So Gundam is, it's kind of hard to say, as like a bit of an outsider to Japan in the 70s and 80s, uh, how influential it was. Obviously, we're still getting Gundam to this day. Gundam is a perpetual franchise that will never end. But like this show was really influential at the time. It was extremely influential. Um and talking about it from an American perspective, it's kind of easy to see why. The show is really high quality. It's really, really good. It's written in a way that is very different from how modern anime is written. And as someone who had never seen anything that was this old before, um, getting into this show took a little bit of effort. Episodes of this show kind of wrap things up. You're not commonly left on these big long cliffhangers that entice you to hit the watch next button. Every episode was kind of built for a 1979 broadcast schedule. So like yeah, they wanted people to check out the next episode every week. But also that incentive that kind of has popped up in recent years for shows to be bingeable, it wasn't there. So getting to the end of an episode and having the conflict actually be wrapped up most times was kind of wild. There are like arcs, quote unquote, that kind of map onto how we think of story arcs in modern anime, but they're very different. They're very, very different. An arc to a show this old is like they will introduce a villain, and then that villain will by proxy send a lot of other enemies at the protagonist and the people with them, and then those guys, they'll get just obliterated every episode. Or not, sometimes the bad guys do win, it happens. And then things kind of almost return to a status quo by the end. It's not like a complete like wipe, but character arc progress is much slower in this time frame. So things sort of slowly step forward as opposed to, charging forward. Um and yeah, so let's talk about the Gundam's length real fast. Um Gundam is 43 episodes long. It's from 1979. I'm going to try to keep on top of giving you guys the year and the episode count in every sort of entry that I do. Um but Gundam, as far as I've been told, was supposed to be slated for a 50 episode run, and it just didn't get all the way there. It seemed to have a like the they seem to have pulled the plug by some point. Um leading to the Gundam films getting released, which are mainly just compilations of the TV series put into movie theaters and out on VHS that really kind of catapulted the series into a more mainstream appeal to my knowledge. Gundam was sort of a slow cult build, as far as I can tell, especially considering the network was not too keen on letting it finish. So the show does kind of wrap up really quickly in like the last four-ish episodes. Not saying that that's a bad thing. The ending of Gundam was actually really cool. Um, it's just I don't know. The pace definitely kicks it up a notch once you get towards the end there. Which actually now that I think about it, isn't so unlike the director of the series, Tomino. Um, that's just something that he does, I suppose. I'm not gonna harp on Gundam forever. It's Gundam. You guys kind of know that it's good. Um, I will offer a word of warning to anyone who's like, I'm gonna try to do this as well. If you don't like Gundam, maybe skip the next decade. Because shows sort of follow in its footsteps from here. There's not like any major improvements to pacing or God, even animation quality for some time, at least on average. There's not really, major strides or improvements for quite some time. Um, in terms of at least writing and pacing and stuff. But I will say Gundam is kind of the cream of the crop here. Gundam is very good. Um, I'm gonna move on from it though, and we're gonna talk about the second show on the list, which is Toshi Gordion, which is a 73 episode series from 1979. And at least at the time that I watched it, um, only 3 episodes had been subbed, and they were not the first 3. It was episodes 4, 5, and 6. So I watched, like, a little over half of episode 4 and kind of turned it off after that. Um, and I look, I'm not gonna disparage the show too much. I'm not gonna be like, "Oh my god, this show is the worst thing ever. How the hell?" But genuinely, how the hell did Gundam get the plug pulled on episode 43 while Gordian was able to run for 73 fucking episodes? How did that even happen? What on earth led to this? I can only imagine that Gordian must have been that much cheaper to produce. Like, and even then, I don't see how it was that much cheaper to produce. The gimmick of Gordian, it's kind of cute. The robot is actually a guy in a power suit, in a power suit, in a power suit, in a power suit. And by the end of this ridiculous process, he's like gigantic. And that is the fucking goofiest shit like ever. Obviously it was toy selling like maxed. Um you can tell by watching the intro that they were like, "Oh my god, please buy our toys." And who knows? Maybe people did um like buy the toys. Maybe that's why this thing is 73 episodes. It has some neat things going on in it in terms of setting and stuff. Kind of takes after westerns a little bit from what I remember. But it's just not interesting. Maybe it would have helped if the first 3 episodes were subbed, but to my knowledge nothing in this show has ever been officially English translated. Let me see. I'm checking out its Wikipedia page to see if it ever got picked up anywhere, and it seems like it was picked up in Latin America, Italy, and France, according to Wikipedia. So I don't know. That happens a lot in this list. We will see multiple instances of that happening. The good Japanese shows were either too short for syndication over here, or were far too expensive to license for smaller, economies, broadcasters in places like Latin America. Um, they would pick up cheaper shows and they would still end up being pretty popular. Which, that's neat. Uh Sort of reminds me of Saint Seiya, which has a similar thing where over here you say that name and it's like, what are you talking about? What is that? But if you say that name in like Brazil, like, suddenly everyone knows what it is, because instead of licensing, I don't know, Dragon Ball, for example. I'm not saying that's what happened in this instance, because I don't know enough, but, instead of licensing Dragon Ball, which have been, I don't know, again, throwing random numbers out there, like 10K to license or whatever, Saint Seiya is sitting over here with way less popularity and way less notoriety, and it's like 5K. And it's like, okay, we're doing that one, and because it's still, something that people wanna see, um, people flock to it. So, um, anyways, so I don't really have a whole lot to say about Gordian. It doesn't seem very good. Um, and yeah, I don't know. Next up is Muteki Robo Trider G7. This is a 50 episode series from 1980. We have entered into 1980. Um, so Trider G7 is good. Like actually solid. I quite liked the episode that I watched, and I did finish an entire episode, which believe me is pretty high praise. Um, that being said, it is very obviously like a children's monster of the week type show where the main character is like a child and he owns a big robot and he owns a business where the robot is sent out to help people, and then like an enemy robot or a monster or something shows up and attacks people and people are like, oh my god, help us, and then he shows up and he helps them and he learns a lesson, and that's the show. It's very basic, very simple. It's the kind of show that I feel like I would randomly like just like throw on a television at a party so that people, would look at it occasionally and be like, "Yep, there's something cool happening on the TV, I guess." Um, which I liked G7 or Trider G7. I thought it was fun. Um, that being said, I don't go to parties, nor do I ever plan on hosting one really. So I probably won't end up watching the rest of it. Um, Again, really solid, good. If you need something to just kind of veg out in front of and not really pay attention to, it's probably pretty solid for that. It's a kids show, but it is an older kids show, so like I don't know how useful it would be for language acquisition if you're like trying to brush up on some Japanese or whatever. But I don't know. It's good. It's good. It's a solid little show. Next up is Uchu Taite God Sigma, which is a 50 episode series from 1980. And I'm not even gonna mess around with this one. I thought it was complete crap. It was boring and bad and not interesting. Hate to boil it down so simply. But I did not like even a single second that God Sigma was on my screen. Um, It only had 2 subtitled episodes though, and instead of talking about how bad this show is and how much I didn't wanna see any more of it, I do wanna talk about how I really wish it was available. No matter how bad any of these shows are, I do think that it should be the case that they are all available in English in some form or fashion. I really hate seeing art be so inaccessible, and I guess that goes for every other language too, but like, man, the logistics of that, even thinking about it, are a nightmare. So, I don't know. I think uh, we just gotta fucking streaming is bad and should go away. But that being said, I do think that the work that a lot of smaller streaming services are doing to keep ancient as hell anime available to people is really good. Um, Of course, buy physical media when you can. Um, support official releases, but I don't know, capitalism, man. Anyways, moving on from God Sigma. Next up is kind of one that came out of nowhere for me, and this kind of does show you how much of an outsider I was to the genre. Next up is Densetsu Kyojin Ideon, or Space Runaway Ideon, as we have it over here. Um, which is weird because that's not what Densetsu Kyojin actually translates to. Uh, Anyways, it is a 39 episode series from 1980, and so when I started Ideon, I did not know what it was. I didn't I knew who Tomino was because I knew about Gundam, and I knew Tomino was like the big director guy behind Gundam, and he really declared, he was essentially the origin of a lot of anime culture as we know it. Kind of came around him and a lot of the people that surrounded him in the industry. So obviously Tomino was a name I knew, but I did not know that he directed this, and I did not know what this was at all. And imagine my shock when I'm starting Ideon and the plot setup for the first few episodes was minus some details, the villains are no longer just human beings from like a random satellite, but they're actual aliens, asterisk on that. Um and they are like it's not like a military robot that's found, but rather one that's kind of dug out of the ground. But that being said, the plot setup is exactly Gundam. It is so similar. Main character is like a kid, and he gets sort of, or like a younger guy rather, and he gets caught up in the middle of powers that are way above him, and it ends up you know leading him into the hands of a group of people that are I guess kind of military adjacent with no recourse, no chance to get away, no way to escape from the the fate that seems to be uh trapping him. And when I started Ideon, I almost dropped it like 5 times cuz here's the thing about Ideon that makes it such a weird show to recommend is that if you thought Gundam was weirdly paced, Ideon has some of the strangest pacing I've probably ever seen. 10 episodes sometimes pass at a time without anything really interesting happening in the show. It wasn't awful or anything. It wasn't really really bad. Um but it was really slow, and every episode got really repetitive. They spend far too long with each of the individual villains, and a few of them don't even get proper send-offs. Um, so, getting through Ideon, I almost gave up on it several times. I thought it was kind of bad. Um, but I will say there's a couple of things that kept me going. And the first is that the opening and ending of this show, like the themes, the actual music, is so fucking good. Oh my god. I love this show's OP, and the ED is in my normal music playlists. That is how good I think the music in Ideon is. Um and also, it came around at a point in time in my life where I was being left with a lot of time to just sit there in front of my laptop and do nothing. Um, I won't, reveal a whole lot of what I was doing, but I will say I was technically on the clock and working. But they had so little for me to do that I was like, fine, I'm just gonna watch anime. So I watched Ideon, like the entirety of it while I was sitting there. Um, and I made it to the end of the show, and if you know anything about Ideon, you know that it does not really end. You make it to what seems to be the setup to a finale, And then in the last 5 minutes of that episode, they go, "And now we're done. Here is the ending of Ideon," and then they rush out like a weird, bizarre ending that kind of just comes out of nowhere. Um, and I was deeply, deeply confused. So I look into it a little bit more, and I find that actually there are 2 films to this series, right? There is Ideon, A Contact, which you will not find on the list. I forgot to mention earlier. No recap specials, no recap movies, no, like nothing that's just repackaging an already existing show. Um, so I pull up A Contact, and I'm like, "Okay, this is a recap movie," so I skip it, and I jump to, Ideon Be Invoked. I gave Ideon Be Invoked a perfect 10. Uh, it takes all of the really interesting and cool lore that Ideon was really slowly building up to, and it, like, perfectly, like, ties it into this really grand finale that's really, really cool, and I did not realize it until after I was done watching, but this show was the inspiration behind Neon Genesis Evangelion, like, really blatantly. Like, it's just the 2 of them rhyme an unbelievable amount, complete with, like, unfinished finales that kind of just shove reality aside to show you what the ending should be, um, being followed up by a movie that actually shows you what that ending is, and the 2 of them are almost conversing with each other because, spoilers for Ideon, Ideon is about sort of humanity, humanity's, like, tendency towards violence, this, original sin that we're born with, which is the sort of the tendency for life to destroy everything around it, in order to keep itself safe. That is what Ideon is about. Um, and so the ultimate resolution of the show is the two branches of humanity coming together, creating this new child that sort of blends the two of them together, literally named Messiah, who delivers them from this violence that sort of ensnared their entire world. Um, and that whole thing is seen by Evangelion. Spoiler alert for Evangelion, where the angels are other attempts at creating humanity. They're other options for humans. And the current version of humans literally have physical manifestations of the things that keep themselves separated from other people. And instead of tearing all that down and getting rid of all of the inherent violence between people and getting rid of all of that, the main character of the series rejects it and says, "No, we would not be better off if we did that," and destroys sort of the attempt to redefine humanity and, like, cleanse everyone of this sin. And it says, "No, we don't need to do that." And oh my god, I fucking love both of these movies so much. I think they are so cool, especially when taken as companion pieces to one another. Oh my god. This is the kind of shit I was hoping to find when I started this. Ideon is so good. Um so I'm not gonna stay on Ideon for much longer, but I will say, um if you like classic sci-fi and don't mind Ideon's weird production values and pacing, uh, watch it. Just watch it. um. Anyways, moving on. Uchu Senshi Baldios is the next show with 34 episodes released in 1980. I finished one episode of this show. I thought it was predictable and just like a weird environmentalism thing where it's like we got to take care of the earth. And that's cool and all. I thought the main character's design was like actually pretty good. Um that's it though. I didn't feel anything towards Baldios particularly. Um it was I don't know, fine. Uh Next up is Tetsujin Niju Go from 1980. Um which is a 51 episode series that I remember nothing of. I remember nothing about this show. I remember that it wasn't mecha by my standards because well, the kid kind of controls the robot. He's got like a little remote control, but the robot's kind of presented as its own sentient being sometimes. It's very odd. I'm not really sure what's up with it. Anyways, so instead, I want to talk about something else that's interesting about this show. And that's that the only upload I could find of it anywhere, literally anywhere, was from some website, obviously, and it was a Betamax recording of the original airing of the show. So I got to see the the airing of the pilot along with all of the advertisements. So genuinely, I was not really paying attention to the show. What I was paying attention to was the cool, like, vintage advertising that was coming up on my computer monitor from Japan in 1980. Like, damn, that's so cool. I don't know, that was just the thing that I liked the most about this one. Was just that it came with a bunch of cool advertisements for old stuff in Japan, and that was fun. Um, didn't like the show. Don't remember anything about it. Next up is Saikyo Robo Dioja, which, to my knowledge, I should probably actually check. Uh, nope. Okay, there doesn't seem to be any way to watch this one uh in English yet, even still. Okay. So, Saikyo Robo Dioja is a 50 episode series from 1981. I watched two full episodes of it, and I thought the concept was really fun and cool. Basically, the idea is like it's kind of a more lighthearted thing. So there's like a kingdom that kind of it's like more of an empire really that spans across multiple planets, like out in space, like a bunch of planets. And the show follows the prince uh, of that kingdom being sent out into the sort of solar system that his family controls and learning about the people and fighting big monsters with his robot. And the characters were honestly really fun. He's got like these two aides that have like really cool personalities. They're like distinct. Still to this day, I have like an imprint of what these three were like in my head. And that's, like, really cool. I don't know, I just like the cast of this one a lot. That being said, its subtitles were machine translated, which doesn't come up a ton on this list surprisingly, but it does come up, and it makes me say, "God damn, we need people to subtitle some of these shows." Oh my god. Again, I really hate seeing art disappear into obscurity because it's like too old and not financially viable or whatever to properly bring it over, and at the same time relying on fans to do it in their spare time is kind of a shitty thing too, because like god, we're all so fucking overworked these days, we're all barely surviving in this nightmare economy, so like having to be like, god, will fans just please give me a proper sub feels shitty too. So like I just don't know how to really articulate that I feel like this show should be available to people. It's it just should be. I don't know. Um, anyways, yeah, I'm even if they did properly subtitle it, I probably wouldn't finish it. Um, you know, uh, it was a cool concept, and I liked, sticking around with it for about an hour, but I don't think I would watch 50 episodes. Next up is Time Bokon series Yato Dataman, which is 52 episodes and it's from 1981. And I watched none of this show because I could not find it. It's gone. In fact, I'm just going to take this entry to talk about the Time Bokon series in general because I think uh, it's important to have a working understanding of what it is, just to understand the history of not only Mecha but like anime in general. It's a really important franchise that has quite literally zero representation here in the West. A lot of the time, full series aren't even translated at all. I watched part of the original series, with Mew back when he was watching that one, and I thought it was funny, and I thought that the first episode was genuinely entertaining, and it gripped me for the entirety of it. Like, I liked it. That being said, I don't think that series is fully translated, or at least it wasn't at the time. And Yado Datamon just seems to be gone completely. I could not find it on the English internet. Um, so like that's sad. The Time Bokon series is the source of a ton, and I mean a ton, of the tropes that a lot of us even grew up on. Without this series, there is no Jesse, James, and Meowth from Pokemon. Like, that isn't a thing that happens. The sort of three villain dynamic that this show started is, or this series, or franchise, I guess, started is so important to anime as a whole. And again, it just gets absolutely zero like mention here in the West. Um Outside of Italy, I think there's one territory that got this show and it was named like Calendar Man or something. Um and I believe it was Italy. I think. I could be wrong about that. Um Anyways, moving on from Yato Dataman, is Ogon Senshi Gold Lighton. Okay. Okay. Gold Lighton, I felt like I was fucking going insane. I felt like watching this show, I was going to lose my fucking mind. Like, oh my god. This is a children's show. Children's. Kids show. Where the robot is a giant lighter. You know, the kind that produces fire? That kind of lighter? And the way the show begins is that the main character of the show finds a lighter on the ground outside and then picks it up and takes it home with him, where he then takes it into his room and starts playing with it. He starts shoving like a screwdriver into it, trying to like get it apart. This is a kids show where the first 10 minutes of the show is a child playing with a lighter that they found on the street. We can't be telling kids to do that. Am I crazy? Did no one on the production staff of this fucking show notice this? What do you mean? This show encourages children to play with lighters and to dismantle them by shoving screwdrivers into them. Like, oh my god. Was no one ever seriously injured after trying to imitate this episode? Are we fucking for real? Because when the kid shoves the fucking screwdriver into the lighter, it opens up because it's a tiny little robot man. And then later, there's a monster that shows up, and the tiny little robot man grows big, and he punches the guy, and then he wins, and then they go home, and the kid still has the fucking lighter. Because the lighter is like the fucking robot. What like what do you mean? What are we doing here? Um and here's the other crazy thing about Gold Lighton is that I encourage each and every one of you. I'm not going to put a clip of it in here because I'm not planning on editing the video portion of this, obviously, but I encourage every single one of you to go and find the opening to Gold Lighton and watch the animation cuts in it, okay? And remember that this is a show from 1981. This show came out in 1981 and looks as good as the opening videos convince you that it looks. Okay? Like, this show is absolutely filled to the brim with unbelievable animation cuts that look really good, and they come out of nowhere. This thing had to have been some kind of like barely supervised animator training project. That I can't think of any other reason why it would be like this. Okay. Um I didn't finish Cold Lighton, obviously. Moving on is Hyakuju or oh my god, Hyakuju o Go Lion. We gotta talk about syndication on American television. And we gotta talk about English dubs for a second. Because when I started Go Lion, obviously, like everything on this list, I did not know what it was. And when I started the show and halfway through the intro, fucking Voltron popped up on my screen, I had to triple take at it. Because obviously I know what that thing is. It's Voltron. I had a toy of that thing when I was a child, as I imagine many other people did. Because it's Voltron. It's an American cultural touchstone from the 80s. So let's talk about Go Lion for a second, just as a show, taking it as a show by itself. I watched half of one episode. Um, Go Lion is 52 episodes from 1981, and I again watched only one episode. Thought the writing was kind of shit. Um, did not care for anything else that was happening. Just did not care. Um, don't remember any of it really. Anyways, so like this show, from what I understand, was not super well received in Japan, and like people weren't really clamoring for it, you know? Like obviously it was enough of a success to run for a full 52 episodes, but to my knowledge, it was one of the cheaper shows to pick up around that era for one reason or another. Might have been because of the animation studio. I believe it was Toei, I think. Um, it might have been because of them. There were any number of possible reasons. But an American dubbing studio picked up the show for American syndication and dubbed it to be something completely fucking different, and then they aired it. They just aired it on American television. And, from there they would continuously just like pick up other random, poorly performing mecha shows and just air them in the United States under the Voltron label. Any super robot show that sort of involved the combination of you know, different like robots into a big super robot. Um that like that was pretty much fair game to be just turned into Voltron. Um Eventually it did kind of outgrow doing this and got turned into like I think a Netflix show or something or other. We will find a different series of Voltron very shortly. Um but yeah, so like this kind of thing was weirdly common back in the day. And we aren't even at what I think is probably the most notable like sit, moment where it happened. Where a show was just kind of turned into something completely different by American showrunners. Um so moving on from Go Lion slash Voltron is Sengoku Majin Go Shogun. Which is a 26 episode series from 1981. Sort of indicating that it was a tighter um uh production here. That being said, I did not like this one very much. It's kind of a parody show, but it's not a parody show in that like it does a lot of really funny stuff. It'd be like imagine trying to translate Spaceballs and showing it to like someone from rural China. Like they're probably not gonna get it because they're so far removed from both the cultural context and the literal language that the script was written in itself. Like you just end up so far outside of something's sphere of influence that it just kind of stops. It doesn't really have a comedy aspect to it anymore. And that's kind of what happened to me with Go Shogun. I didn't really get it. I know it was making fun of a lot of the shows that I just finished watching, but like, I don't know, there's just a lot of things that I felt didn't really make it across the language barrier to me. I don't know. Other people seem to like this one more than I do, so, maybe there is something to this one. I thought the OP was really good. That's it though. Next up, Rokushin Gatai God Mars. 64 episodes from 1981. I made it through six. I made it through six whole episodes of this one before I ultimately decided, no. Ultimately, I think the thing that swayed my decision was the fact that it was 64 episodes. That's just too much. That's just way too much. I did like it though. I did enjoy it. The character writing was really good. I thought the directing and the actual animation was kind of bad, but the writing itself was like kind of solid for the episodes I was watching. Until the pace slowed down to an absolute fucking crawl. The premise of this one is like really cool, where like the robots are like the main character is a prince that was sent to Earth from like a distant planet. And all of the robots were sent to Earth along with him to protect him. And he grew up there as a baby, and now he doesn't know anything about the home that he was like supposed to be a part of. But he does have all these relics from it. And so when this whatever war, I'm working off of like older memory here. Whatever war ended up destroying his planet sort of finds its, the antagonizing force finds its way to Earth chasing after him. And if the catch here is if he ever dies, all six of the robots will explode. They will literally vaporize the Earth and anyone near it. So the entire time he's trying to defend the place that he actually finds to be his home while he's like attempting to ward off this like evil alien force. And it when it comes to the evil alien force, I found that to be the most boring element of the show. But everything about the main character and the actual character dynamics in the show was good, and I liked that. So you know, that one's maybe worth a watch if you have more patience, I guess, than I do. Um, Next up is Ginga Senpu Breaker, 39 episodes from 1981. I only watched one episode and I hated it. I hated Breaker. It was very boring. Most of the episode was characters standing around in a room and just saying things at each other. They were like, "Oh my god, the Jupiter hooligans are destroying things," and I'd be like, "What the fuck? We're in a universe where people are living near Jupiter, and you're not showing that to me. You're just having people tell me about it in a room." Like that's just I don't know, pulling from ancient memory again, of course. I don't really remember a lot of the plot setup because it was bad. It was a terrible like at least a terrible first episode. I'm not going to watch the rest because I didn't find it very interesting. I will say that this one's actually pretty readily available in English though, which is a big plus. I like that. Anything that gets like a physical Blu-ray release here, good, good, good. Next up is Taiyo no Kiba Dagaram, 75 episodes from 1981, and I watched 31 of them. I sat through 31 episodes of this show and gave up on it because the pace slowed down to an unbelievable crawl. Oh my god. I really love the setup to Dagaram. I really do. I love the first few episodes. I think the setting is so cool. I just think that everything that started happening in the middle of the show was not going anywhere. And that is a shame because it's really cool. Um the general conceit of this one is Earth is has colonized another planet, and everyone who was born there and views it as their home views themselves as being oppressed by trade relations with Earth. And so they rebel, and the series sort of follows a puppet government that's set up and the rebellion that's kind of being led by sort of a plucky group of underdogs who among them is the main character who's like I believe the child of one of the major antagonists, I think. Again, been a while since I watched any episodes of this one. In addition, his childhood best friend, who he is not so subtly completely in love with, um, throws herself into the middle of this fucking active war zone in order to track him down and bring him home. And ultimately ends up tagging along for at least a portion of the journey. Um, she kind of plays like a background force as well, where like she's able to access a lot of areas where everybody else isn't because she is a highly affluent member of society and does seemingly, like a lot of her character arc is turning against the very people she's surrounded by because she sees, what they're doing to these people. And it is a really cool story about the horrors of war and autonomy and sovereignty and all of these cool things that are going on in this setting, and the show wants to show you none of it. It doesn't want you to see any of it. It wants to put it at the end of 75 episodes while doing as little as possible with this premise along the way. And oh my god, it drives me crazy. Oh my fucking god. Oh. I wish I liked Dogram more. There is a manga adaptation that's, I believe, still releasing. I could be wrong about that. Maybe I'll check that out if it ever gets an official English translation, which would be really cool. I think that would be awesome. But I'm not gonna hold my breath. Um. Anyways, moving on from Dogram. Um. Again, if you're more patient than me, maybe it's good. Next up is the Uchu Senshi Baldios movie from 1981. I didn't watch it because I didn't finish Baldios. Moving on. Sento Mecha Zabungle. Um, this is a 50 episode show, and it is our first from 1982, and I finished this one. I watched all 50 episodes. This show is amazing. A lot of people don't like this one, and I can totally see why you wouldn't. Fair warning if you're gonna, try to watch it yourself. That this show features an uncomfortable amount of Native American racism and weird eugenicsy stuff towards the end. That kind of gets really unsettling and weird. There's like some races of people in this show that are explicitly confirmed to be genetically inferior to other people, and that is not good. That is not a good thing for you to put in your show. Tell me no, thank you. A lot of these were of course ideas imported to the show by the show's main inspiration, which is Western movies from the 70s and probably before that, unfortunately. Oh no. I just, man, obviously eugenics was kind of everywhere all over the world at some point. But Tomino, you can import the cool things about Westerns while leaving the racism behind. Granted, this is a show from '82, so like I'm not gonna really hold it against them too hard and say that the show is actually pretty fun. It's a comedy. And even though Go Shogun kind of failed to deliver on the idea of a mecha comedy to me, Zabungle kind of delivered in spades because Zabungle is made up of two halves. The first half is the actual writing, and the writing is solid. Obviously the slow pacing's still kind of here. Um, but that's kind of lessened by the fact that the episodes of the show are less important feeling, especially, like across the entire series, and most of them are just kind of lighthearted and fun to watch. Um, so the other half of this show is the combat, like the actual robots fighting, and they use this as an excuse to do a lot of slapstick animation. There's a lot of silly and goofy things that happen in this show. People like there's an entire character in this show named Big Fat Man. Yes, that's his real name, not joking, who entirely exists to be a physical comedy prop that stands around in the backgrounds of shots and gets slapped, punched, like thrown around, launched into walls. Like he just gets shit on the entire show, and it's hilarious. It's genuinely always really funny. And I just had a great time with it. The show's cast is really good. It does just enough to make you feel like you actually care about them too. It doesn't really dive super deep into a ton of melodrama until towards the end of the show. And even then it's using that melodrama as an excuse to be funny again. Um and it has actual character dynamics that really, really affect the show. And, you're gonna actually really care about this cast by the time you're done with it. Um, well, most of them anyway. Some of them get like one episode of screen time despite being in the OP, which I think is really funny. It also has a lot of really cool mecha designs. Just really, really cool mecha designs. The mechas themselves are like really analog too because it's based off of Western stuff. So instead of like a high tech like cockpit with like a bunch of shiny buttons and screens built into it, it is like a literal like truck cabin with like a leather bench seat and like manual controls. It's kind of like amazing in that way. Yeah, I don't know. Zabungle's just a good time. It's just like an enjoyable show that I really liked. Again, a lot of people don't really like this one. A lot of people think that Tomino's comedies don't really hit for them, and I think that's fine. I just grew up on stuff like The Three Stooges, so like I liked it. Um, Moving on from Zabungle, Time Bokan series Gyakuten Ipatsuman, which is a 58 episode series from 1982. Only one episode was subtitled, and I only watched about half of it, and then I turned it off because I thought it was soulless and boring. Again, the Time Bokan series is extremely important. It is an extremely important show historically. I would be curious to know what people thought of this one when it was airing, though, because it seemed notably worse than the others. Um, Next up is Kiko Kantai Dairugger 15, a 52 episode series from 1982 that is also Voltron. Yeah, this is another one that kind of just got eaten up by the Voltron colossus that was kind of sweeping up some shows here. Um yeah, so Dairugger 15's really really bad. uh the show has less than zero respect for your time. Um it made me watch the same robot building like animation twice in the first episode. Twice. And the first time they were like, "Nah, never mind. You don't actually need to go do that." And everyone got out of, the robot. And then they did it again like 10 minutes later. Like, oh my god. The big thing with Diagra 15 is that the robot is 15 parts, so there's 15 pilots. And, this show's pretty long, but I don't have a lot of confidence in them, that they would be able to handle a 15 character cast, especially since, I know it's not the same studio, not the same writers, or not really the same anything, but I just watched Ideon not too long before I watched this show, and in Ideon, there are 3 pilots piloting the robot, and one of them gets shafted for almost the entire series and almost never gets any screen time. Most of the series, I could not even remember his name because nobody ever spoke to him. So when I say that I don't trust Rugger 15 to be able to handle 5 times the number of characters that Ideon had piloting its robot, you know, understand that that's where I'm coming from. I'm not gonna watch Rugger 15. It seemed terrible. Moving on is Kagaku Kyujotai Techno Voyager. This one is only 18 episodes and it was from 1982, and this one also received a notable English dub called Thunderbirds 2086. I don't know anything about Thunderbirds 2086. The dub was not available online at all when I was attempting to find this. And the sub was it only had 1 episode, which I did finish. It seemed a little dull, and it seemed a little questionable whether or not it was Mecha, but again, talking about a show is more fun than not talking about a show, so, I thought Techno Voyager was kinda solid-ish. I don't have a whole lot of memory about the actual show, to be totally honest. Um, I would probably end up watching it if it ever got a full sub, or honestly, maybe I would check out Thunderbirds 2086 first, because that seems like the more notable one. People seem to really like Thunderbirds 2086. Yeah, no, not a whole lot to say about Techno Voyager. Little sad that it kind of disappeared. Next up is Makyo Densetsu Acro Bunch, which is a 24 episode series from 1982 that I watched 1 episode of. The first time I attempted to watch Acro Bunch, it was the first time, I was going through this series, or, the Mecha series, and I was like, kind of fresh off of Zabungle at this point, and I was like, okay, the OP to this one, Acro Bunch, seems really, really cool. And then I got to the actual show, and it was machine translated, tragically. Um, I watched part of an episode and then stopped. And in that time, since I stopped and now, unbelievably, High Dive picked this show up for publication and for streaming rather, and translated it and gave it proper subtitles. So I have seen the first episode of Acro Bunch again. Hey, editing Tom here. Just wanted to step in and issue a correction here. I said that High Dive picked up Acro Bunch, but it actually seems to have been Discotech that did it, with an official Blu-ray release and everything. And they also seem to have licensed it out to, I believe it was Retro Crush, and that's where I was able to find it. Unfortunately, checking the catalog today, Retro Crush seems to have cycled it out. But yeah, it seems like it got a physical Blu-ray release with Discotech. So apologies for that little mix-up. Streaming services are really annoying to keep straight these days. So I don't know. Okay, well, and look, the fact that it's only 24 episodes does make it kind of tempting to actually watch the entire thing. That being said, it was just a tiny bit too boring in the first episode. Just, like, a little bit to the point where, like, I don't think I'd be able to finish it, like, actually. So I did give up on it again, unfortunately, and now High Dive only has, um, paid options. They used to have, free ones, and, any streaming service these days, I guess, can't get away with that anymore. Um, but Acrobunch itself is really neat aesthetically. It's a sort of a high fantasy, or not high fantasy, a kind of fantasy mecha where, like, the world is very different from ours. and it's kind of about hunting for ancient treasure and like fending off villains who are trying to get that treasure. Honestly, the villain lineup in the show was the reason why I didn't want to continue watching it. Um, but the OP and the ED are both really good. So like I don't know, it's still got a place in my heart somewhere. Maybe someday I'll be like, yeah, you know what? I feel like having some fun and watching Acro Bunch. But I think for now, especially with the stuff that I'm onto right now, once we get to the end of this list, you'll understand um why I didn't drop everything and go back and finish Acro Bunch. Um Next up is Ginga Renpu Baxingar, which is a 39 episode series from 1982. Last I checked, I don't believe this one has ever been fully English translated. It could have been picked up because this is a sequel to Ginga Senpu Breaker, um, which I did not watch. That being said, Breaker had been picked up by Discotek Media. So maybe they picked up Baxengar at some point and it's available. Um, not sure. I didn't really watch any of it. I I don't care. um, Again, maybe these are great. I just didn't enjoy Brager, so moving on. Technically in release order, this is where Ideon Be Invoked releases, but obviously I watched that with Ideon, and I recommend you do the same. Next up is a film, Techno Police 21C, which released in 1982. Okay, so Technopolice 21C rocks. It's really good. It's actually unironically a great movie. I highly, highly, highly recommend it. I'm not going to spoil too much about it, but just know it's about like a counterterrorism force um attempting to stop like a rampaging AI tank using their own like robots that are kind of sentient. It's not really a mecha by my standards, but I don't care. This movie was so good. Um at some point in the movie, the status of protagonist very gradually slips away from the man who is ostensibly the center of the film to the tank as it goes on a sentient like AI fueled rampage destroying everything around it in the city. There is, I am not joking, a multiple minute scene in this film where glamour shots of the tank are played while a love song is played over it inexplicably. It's amazing. It's genuinely so good. I fucking loved this. This one's interesting as well because it was going to be a TV series where the production eventually just ended up falling apart, and instead of scrapping everything, they were like, "Well, what if we reworked this into a movie?" And you can really feel the moment in production that happened. Obviously this thing had a really messy production, so like that does shine through in a lot of the cracks. And if you know anything about me, you know I love really weird media. Um, that being said, Technopolice 21C is good, even not at like even if you're not approaching it as like I want to watch something weird. It's just funny. It's just a good comedy. And I don't know if it was intended to be one. Um, if you take nothing else away from this video, it's that you should watch Technopolice 21C. It's like what, 80 or 90 minutes? It's not long. It has music by Joe Hisaishi. Yes, that Joe Hisaishi, the one who composed for Studio Ghibli for a very, very, very long time. I don't know if he still is because I have not seen anything recent from that studio. But yeah, so great film, unironically great film. Highly recommend checking it out. Next up is Macross. Next up is just Macross. It's three in a row. It's three bangers in a row. It's crazy. Mecha fans were eating so good in 1982. Macross is a 36 episode series from 1982. And look, if you are unaware that Macross is like kind of the best anime from the 80s, it's Like, I don't know what else to tell you at this point. Yes, you should watch Macross. It is probably one of the more modern feeling shows on this list so far in terms of pacing. It feels much tighter. It feels like a lot of the chaff was kind of removed. Bigger events happen more often. The plot kind of does have a bit of pep in its step. It is ostensibly an idol show as well. Has a lot of scenes where the lead female character, Min Mei, sings for people. Um, yeah, just a great show all around. Don't really have a whole lot specific I can say in terms of what makes it really great. I could go on and on forever about, oh, the world building's really good, and oh, the cast is great. Like, I could talk in circles about how great this show is, but I think enough people have sang its praises. I wanted to talk about the weirdness that is this show's English release. Macross itself is a very weird franchise when it comes to its relationship with us. You see, back in the ye olden days, back in, I don't know, the fucking 80s, in order for certain networks to consider picking up a show for syndication, they would need to know that it was at least a certain length. And if it wasn't long enough, it wouldn't get syndicated. They would not allow it to air on their network. Um Obviously this only counted for things coming inward from other places. They wanted to be able to consistently air it for, at least a year or so, right? Like, they wanted some amount of consistency out of it. And unfortunately, Macross just didn't really reach that because it was a much tighter, like, sort of production, and it was only 36 episodes. Um so instead of just releasing it on video here or going to a different network, the people behind Macross's English release decided to purchase the rights to Macross and also two other shows and bundle them all together and call them Robotech. I believe the other ones, I know one of them was Genesis Climber Mospedia. I don't actually know what the other one is. Yeah, it was Harmony Gold that did this. Um, which Harmony Gold is really infamous if you don't know about them. Basically, they were the kings of making an anime and then changing it completely and never you know like not sticking to the script or even leaving it as just one show. One of their most infamous ones is Captain Harlock and the Queen of the Thousand Years, which is a mashup of Captain Harlock and the Queen of the Thousand Years, which are, I think they're two Masamoto manga that got adapted into anime. And this is I think it's a movie, it might be a show, uh or a special rather, where the two characters that are in the title never interact because they're not from the same show. So, like, Harmony Gold was a fucking nightmare company. Um, I believe they're also kind of responsible for a couple other really infamous dubs. But, moving on. Uh, they were responsible for turning Macross into Robotech, and then sort of folding in Super Dimensional Cavalry, Southern Cross, and Genesis Climber Mospedia. Those are the two. Southern Cross and Mospedia I have not gotten to myself, so I don't really know what's in them. I will be watching the sub, obviously. Um, so I don't know anything about Robotech as like a show. Um, Obviously I recommend just watching Macross. Like, just watch Macross. Don't If you ever start up a dub and Harmony Gold is attached to it in any way, I maybe don't watch it. Um, anyways, Macross is probably the best show watched so far in terms of just like a show. Um, yeah, it's really good. Next up is I No Senshi Rainbow Man, which I watched a couple years ago. While we didn't. Okay, this show is lost media. I should probably lead with that. It's a 22 episode series from 1982, and it is lost media. It is gone. It is currently gone. Um, we have about half of it. And when I watched it, the first episode was not subtitled. So it was just kind of me curiously skipping through an episode and being like, "All right, what's this like?" and not really absorbing anything. None of the quality was very good, obviously. Like nothing about this show is preserved like at all. So, um the only interesting thing I could really come up with to say about this one was that it, according to the end of the Betamax recording, probably, I don't know if VHS had really taken off in Japan in 1982 yet. But the only thing that was interesting about it is right at the end of the recording, there was a thing that announced that the next show in the time slot after it was Macross, which means that Macross aired on the same network at almost the same time as Rainbow Man, which means that Rainbow Man should, in theory, be attached to a lot of recordings of Macross, right? You would think that people who wanted to record Macross because it's a really good show and one that people still talk about to this day because it's fucking Macross would be we would have more than just like 11 episodes of Rainbow Man. We like maybe I don't know. This shit, it's unbelievable. I don't know. Moving on from Rainbow Man. Next up is the hilariously titled Aku Saisakusen Surungle. 53 episodes, and it is our first show from 1983, and I watched 0 episodes of it because no subtitled English or no subtitled Englishes. I'm so good at speaking. No subtitled episodes exist. There are none. Um, maybe there were subs available at some point on some platform. Could not find them for the life of me. And there was a dub produced, and it seems to have been named Macron 1. Not saying that they should have changed the name. I'm just saying that I understand why you didn't release a show called Surungle into the English market because I think it actually might have just died here. So I understand why they changed the name to Macron 1. Also could not find Macron 1. Hey guys, editing Tom here. I just wanted to jump in and say that actually, Macron 1 is another Robotech situation, as it turns out. It's a combination of two mecha series, both Go Shogun and Strungle, and it was done by Saban Entertainment, which is pretty infamous for doing shit like this. So, yeah, don't know how I never figured that out in research, or even figured that out trying to find and watch Macron 1, which I was never able to actually track down. Um, Anyways, yeah, I don't know. I guess that's just a weird piece of trivia that I missed. Back to the podcast, which is a shame. Srungle. I was kind of looking forward to seeing what the fuck a Srungle was, but I guess I don't get to know. Moving on is Sei Senshi Dunbine. Oh my fucking god. Okay. Yeah, so much for wrapping up the episode anytime soon. So Dunbine is uh, a show from Tomino that okay, basic facts. Start with the basic facts. This show was 49 episodes long, released in 1983, and I got through 9 episodes, and I did not like it. I really tried. I really gave it my all, and every episode was losing me more and more. Every episode of Dunbine lost me more and more and more. Dunbine is a very interesting show on the surface. I just think it's written very poorly. Um, Obviously, in terms of pacing, that is kind of the silver bullet that kills a lot of shows from this era for me. But oh my god. So Dunbine started life as a novel that Tomino himself wrote, a fantasy novel that did not feature any robots. And when Tomino wanted to, you know, adapt his novel as a televised anime, he was told no by Sunshine. Hey, editing Tom here, yet again. I don't know why the fuck I just called sunrise sunshine. What's wrong with me? Why did I do that? Am I stupid? Don't answer that question. Because obviously they're not going to let him just adapt his own novel out of nowhere using studio funds. Like, of course not. So instead, what they did is they just decided, okay, Tomino, you know what? You're allowed to do this if and only if you put robots in it so we can market it as a mecha series. Now, I normally don't talk about the robot designs, mainly because especially a lot of them is early on, don't really impress me a ton. I do want to give a special shout out to the robot from Macross. I love that thing. It's just really cool looking. Um, the robots from Dunbine are unbelievably cool. They are giant bugs. Obviously, they're still robots, but the thing they're themed after is bugs. And I've never ever seen that been like done before. Genuinely, maybe someone else has tried this before, and I'm just unaware. New concept for me, and I thought it was really cool. I like bugs. They're awesome. They're neat. So seeing this this series sort of adapt all of these cool, bug robots and put them in a high fantasy setting. I was like, "Holy fuck, this is awesome." And then I tried to like actually watch the show and I realized that I hated it. I didn't like any of the characters. I did not particularly enjoy um the like very small amount of world building we are given in 9 episodes. It's shockingly little. Um, you spend a lot of the opening of the series just kind of hoping they start to explain some stuff, and then they just don't. They just stop. Um, so you know, obviously something was kind of going wrong with the production of this one a little bit. Tomino having to force robot fights into what is ostensibly just an adaptation of a book without robot fights in it was obviously fucking with the pacing. Obviously. So later on, Tomino was allowed to re-adapt that book. Uh and instead of getting to do a full series of it, he was allowed to do a 3-episode OVA, and that 3-episode OVA is an infamous one that a lot of people have heard of because it's fucking Garzy's Wing. This fucking series, 2 for 2, unbelievable. I thought I genuinely could not fucking believe it when I was watching Dunbine, and I was like, "Wait a fucking minute, is this Garzy's Wing? What is happening?" I have not seen Garzy's Wing myself. Well, okay, I've seen 1 episode of Garzy's Wing. I watched 1 episode of the dub, and I need to watch the rest at some point. Um, but, like, there's no good adaptation of this book, unfortunately. So it seems like, Dunbine's a little fucked from the start. Like after the second bad adaptation of this novel, I'm beginning to wonder if the novel is even good at all. So like, Dunbine I thought Dunbine kind of sucked. I thought it was boring and bland. I'm not gonna like everything Tomino produces, obviously, which sucks because Tomino's my goat so far. Like, oh my god, he's had a crazy hit rate so far. Moving on though. Genma Taisen is a movie from 1983 that I watched 10 minutes of before giving up on it. And the first thing I need to say is that Genma Taisen is named Harmageddon in the US. Fucking Harmageddon. A really weird movie. Very odd. All the animation was really cheaply done, and like the plot was nothing. Like I have no idea how to even explain it. Um, I have in my notes, the script feels like it wasn't written by a human being for human beings to watch. I don't know who this movie is for, but it's not for me. So I think that's the best way to put it. This movie feels like it's written by aliens. Really weird. And then finally, the last show I have to catch up you all with I don't know if that's the way to word it, but I'm an hour and a half into this recording, so fuck it. Is Kosoku Denjin Albigus, which is a 45 episode series from 1983 that I watched one episode of. Only two episodes were subtitled in general. I thought it was eh. Um, it had a bad VHS transfer, obviously, like or the source of these episodes was a kind of destroyed VHS tape. So, the world didn't I just have written down world didn't feel fleshed out enough, just jumps right in. So I don't know. Apparently this one was also going to be Voltron, and the Voltron series this one was going to be turned into just ended up getting canceled for one reason or another. Maybe it was because Albagus sucked. I don't really know. I don't know. Didn't really like this one though. Um and now we sort of I guess get ready to end whatever this is. So I've watched fucking 30 shows at this point. That is the first 30 anime. From here, I'm going to try to make it so that it's like 10 episode chunks. This is not going to be a consistent like upload schedule kind of series. This is going to be when I get through 10 episode chunks, I will record another episode and talk about the shows that I watched. This episode is uniquely going to be very long, obviously, because it has more shows in it than any other. I won't be rushing through these ones, and my memories will be more fresh on these ones as well, obviously. So normally I'd be like, these are the next 10 shows, and maybe point out like, okay, these are the ones that I'm kind of interested in, like I'm kind of keeping my eyes on. But I'm not really gonna go too hardcore into that at the moment. I'm just going to point out that the current show I am watching is Votoms, a show that I I can't believe it. I'm kind of in love with. Like I'll talk more about it in the next episode, obviously. But just know this is one I'm gonna finish, and it's 52 episodes, so this will take a little while. Looking ahead at the other ones as well. Mosspedia is in here. And that's like the other really big one that I know about. The next cutoff is going to be the 40th entry, which is Ginga Hyoryu V Farm, which I don't know anything about. So this is Votoms, Sasuraiger, uh, Plaurez Sanshiro, Chojiku Seiki Orgas, Psycho Armor Gorvian, Document Taiyo no Kiba Dagaram, and Chorokyu Dagaram, Kiko Soseki Mospedia, Tokuso Kihei Dorvak, and Ginga Horyu Vfam. So those are the next episodes set of 10, and I suppose I will see you all when I get through those. Yeah, if you made it this far in this like really rambly nonsense podcast question mark, thank you. Check out my other socials, like and subscribe. I think I'm supposed to tell you guys to do that. I don't care. I'm not your boss. Um, Check out my main channel. I'll try to be more consistent in posting to it, but obviously I can make no promises. And yeah, thank you all for watching, and goodbye.